My guest this morning is Michael Pratt. He's a professional with over 15 years of experience in product management, product marketing support, supplier management, sales support, organizational design, contract negotiations, and team management development. There's more to him than that. We're going to talk about that. We have some commonalities already. We were talking about that whenever we were doing our preliminary talks while I was off air. But he is also the CEO and founder of Pivet. Is that correct? Pivet, P-I-V-E-T?
That is correct. Pivet Communications. We spell the word pivot phonetically.
That's right, P-I-V-E-T. So we're going to be talking about that. And a couple of minutes ago, and again, my guest name this morning is Michael Pratt. Real easy to remember, not a difficult name at all. Michael Pratt, calling all the way from Texas. And I said a couple of minutes ago that we had some commonalities in terms of us. We both worked for AT&T, and that's what we were talking about before going on air. Our times at AT&T, I was there from 1985 to 2000, and Michael says he was there during that time frame. So our paths may have crossed because it's a good possibility they crossed because it wasn't. And if we were in Baskin Ridge together, it's not that there was a whole lot of African American folks walking around. And so it's a good thing. It's a good possibility our paths may have crossed while we were there. But in any event, usually my first question, Michael, is kind of like, where did the interest in, because you started a telecommunications company, where did your interest in that field begin? Was that something, again, as a child in school or later in life? Where did that whole thing begin? And then we're going to work our way up to how you decided to branch out and start Pivet.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for having me on your show. I'm appreciative for the opportunity. You know, I was listening to you provide the weather update for the weekend in your area, and I'd love to ask for you to switch places because we're pushing 100 every day. and you're going to reach where we already are at this early in the morning because we're almost 80 already, and it's almost 6 a.m. or it's just after 6 a.m. So can we just switch after we finish our
I know that's right. Now that's hot. Y'all up there into 100. Yeah. That's hot.
Yeah, on a regular basis. But joking aside, like, how did I evolve into Pivet is essentially the question. And you know, I come from a military. My mother and father are from the South, Alabama and Mississippi. And it's funny because I was having a lesson at dinner last night, given the changes to the Supreme Court created with affirmative action being struck down, giving a timeline for my children. I have a boy, 17, 14, and this year 11. And explaining to them that at my age, affirmative action had been around since literally right before I was born. But my father, who's from Duck Hill, Mississippi, a rural town in Mississippi, went to the Duck Hill School for Colored Children, was born in 44, before affirmative action had been in place.
Right.
I gave a timeline to my children so that they understood the relevance of how this momentary point, and it's now a momentary point in American history in which something had been created for, I think the terminology these days is ADOS. American Descendants of Slaves is one of the languages that's out right now. And those of us whose families are traced back to the folks who had been enslaved and brought over here, how one of these moments where there was an opportunity to help level the playing field, how it's a moment because it's gone, right?
Correct.
But I'm a beneficiary of it, okay? And so I was explaining that to my kids and showing that it's one generation because my dad didn't have that access originally when he was born because he was born in Jim Crow South. My father, and we were talking about, and I know this is a deviation, but it's for a purpose.
No, it's not. It's not a deviation. It's right on. It's spot on.
And I was trying to explain to my children that, you know, my father, being born in 1944 in Duck Hill, Mississippi, did not have these opportunities because of the Jim Crow Southern experience, in a separate but equal, and then moving forward, right? And so because I am a product of affirmative action, I had great grades. We were discussing why affirmative action was good and bad, some of the negatives and so forth, and just really making sure they understood why their focus on grades, academics, extracurricular, and their well-beings and becoming great people right now is so important because opportunities to level the playing field have been removed. So there may now be new obstacles that my children are going to have to go forward on that I didn't. So we were having that discussion, and it's relevant here because the opportunities for me that yielded Pivet came in part because there were programs in play like affirmative action. But when I was in school, they had math, engineering, science achievement, right? And I was actually the president of my club in high school. And so I was given opportunities, and there was a focus to make sure that as I was a budding academic that, I was made aware of and given opportunities to see what the world looked like away from what I was coming from, right? There was no one in my home that had gone to school or college, and I just didn't have it. I was in California. There was nothing around me where I had someone showing me what it was. I could read it. I saw it on Different World or on the Cosby Show, but it wasn't in my world. And so I graduated high school and started off in a computer engineering program, full academic scholarship, and went down that path and started to learn. And I'm a gadget geek. I just really am into gadgets, into electronics and such. So I gravitated towards science, math, and this type of technology. Went through my degree. I actually switched and went into social sciences. I changed out of computer engineering, went into social sciences, because I just realized I wanted to go do something I really liked, not just, I had been told go become an engineer because you get a good job. And I had a prescient mentor who told me, go figure out what you could be the best at, not just what will give you a good job.
Right.
And again, this is this legacy of that as an African American that we have done so much, but we also at times, without understanding or being aware, have so many more obstacles or so many steps back, even just in opportunity.
Correct.
Exploitation, right? Because
correct.
I was taught when I left high school, and those around me, and I would probably say I thought we were the Cosbys, but when I got to college, I realized we were talking about Esterol. Like, I realized I was actually more the good times. I wasn't
right.
We were lower middle income, right? Like, almost a check from check environment. But I was taught you go get your degree to get a good job.
Correct.
And then, but that's not what those who have a background in which, where college was already experienced, where there's a generational thing. Because I lived amongst kids who were second generation, third, or later generation. No, they were going to get a degree in what they really liked. And I had a mentor tell me, get a degree, go study what you like, and be the best at it, because the best archaeologists, the best teachers, the best this, that, it doesn't matter. The best will earn a good living because you're the best. So go figure out how to be the best. And so I changed into social science. It's my world. I love people. I love thinking and watching and understanding people, managing, engaging with people. So I went down that path. And that long-winded explanation to your question is I went down a path that I got into gadgets. I got into what I already loved. I studied what I wanted. And then it evolved into having a really great career experience. Like we talked about before the show started, worked at AT&T, Old Ma Bell, had opportunities to be around folks that taught me quite a bit in product development, product management. I moved around. I went into distribution, worked for the largest accessories distributor in North America, and got to understand kind of in real world what a supply chain and how supply chains work and what logistics are about. So I got to learn how to develop products. I worked at the largest consumer telecommunications company at the time, and learned how to do that. And then I started working with smaller businesses and learned how to do the front end of business, how to do business development, how to do sales, learn that whole experience. And all of that amalgamated into me at one point going out on my own with a separate company and becoming what's called a manufacturer's rep. And at that point, I started taking brands. I was like, I called the poor man's Shark Tank, right? So people would come to me and say, hey, you have relationships with Best Buy. You have relationships with Apple and Verizon and all these guys. Can you help get our brands in? And so I used to get paid by helping introduce brands into national retail and global retail. And that then evolved into at a point in time where I just realized I'm making a lot of money for a lot of other people, and I think I can do all of this myself. I can lead this myself.
Right.
So at that point, I do have my business partner, Will Marshall, and I sat down, talked, and we said, let's pivot. Let's get away from what we're doing and go do something together ourselves. Let's pivot away from what we were doing. That's why we ended up naming the company Pivet. And the definition of pivot is the point at which something turns. And so that sits at the core of our brand and our business and what we are focused on doing, which is analyzing. Like I tell people all the time, we're not, like right now, if you were to look on our site, you see primarily mobile accessories, phone cases, charging products, like wall chargers, cables, wireless charging, all of those type of things that we've been working on. But at the core of who we are is we're a solutions-driven business. Our goal has been from the onset is to look at scenarios and come up with solutions for them. And so we pivot. Our goal is to pivot industry into different directions. And our first foray into that is with self-cycle technology, which is kind of what, part of what I'm excited to be on the call today, just to tell the world about for some regard, right? So, it's been a long path, but it's been a very blessed path in which I've had people around me give me the sign, show me the way. We did a product line years ago where we made a phone case with the West African term Sankofa, which essentially means, you stand on the shoulders of those before.
Correct.
And I am literally the manifestation of that.
No, absolutely. Matter of fact, let me go back all the way back to whenever you were talking about being in the military. What branch were you in?
I was a military brat.
Oh, you were a military brat. Okay.
Yeah, my father. I'm sorry. So we're a military family. Yeah, my father was 23 years Air Force.
Oh, see, that's the commonality. I was Air Force as well.
There we go.
That's why I asked the branch. What was the branch? Because I was Air Force as well. I was a jet engine mechanic for 9 years. And so as you were coming through, like you were talking about your interests and your major, the school that you went to, because I know the school your father went to was segregated, but the school you went to, was that segregated? And were there many African Americans pursuing what you were pursuing, or were you kind of like out there on your own?
It's a great question. And again, shows the generational aspect of all of this. I keep referring to the Supreme Court's actions, but so the school I went to was fairly diverse in the sense of it was probably about 55% white. And then the rest of that, because we were a military neighborhood, right? We were right next to McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento.
Correct.
And back then, Sacramento was a military city, right? We had multiple Air Force and Army bases there. And so the school reflected the U.S. military at the time. So we had various different Asian groups like Filipino and Korean students. We had African American students. We had Hispanic, primarily Mexican students, and then white students. So it was pretty diverse in totality. But then the percentages were very different, right? And the black population that probably was, I want to say it was probably representative equal to the country population. It was probably like 14% black.
Okay. Now, of that, I mean, so was there like a collection of you all that were like gadget geeks and went that way, or was it? That's where I'm trying to get to, because it's not a whole lot that have that penchant or have that desire. But then again, maybe there is, and I just don't know. That's what I'm trying to get a feel for.
No, not at all. I mentioned earlier MESA, Math, Engineering, Science Achievement.
Right.
The program that the state of California had implemented to help try and bring people of color, children of color, focused into math, engineering, and science back then. I was president of it my senior year. And that afforded me a lot of opportunities to go check out different universities and be introduced into higher education. But no, there wasn't a lot, right? Now, my environment, because it was a military-type environment, family-wise, it was a pretty conservative and pretty organized and regimented type of world, right? Not just at my home, but my friends around and such. And an interesting fact that I realized was all of my closest friends in high school, and especially including those we still are in touch now, decades later, all came from dual-parent homes. There is a
correct
fascinating point.
That's big.
Came from dual-parent homes.
That's big.
All of us.
Because when I'm not, my day job, as they say, when I'm not doing radio, is I'm the principal of a school. And 95% of my students are single-parent homes. And I grew up in a dual-parent home, too. It does make a difference. Now, that's not to say single-parent homes cannot be successful. That's not what we're saying. But it does, or it is a factor, and it does make a difference.
It makes a massive difference. And it's fascinating because, again, all of my friends then, my best friend, Nico, was, he and I were like two black dudes a lot of the times, played basketball, did everything, but both parents together still on both sides. And all my friends that I was close with, we all came from those type of families, and it set a certain structure. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about in particular today, but it's necessary, right?
It's all germane. See, I mean, it's like
all do it, but it's better when it's two.
No, it's all germane, because normally my guests are like authors or whatever. We'll talk about their books and their writing experiences. Have you written a book?
No.
Okay, so then that's why all of the discussion, it is relevant to what made you and how you got to where you are as the CEO of a company. Because I don't even want to talk about that in terms of when you were talking about you and your business partner, just like, hey, we can do this on your own. There had to be some obstacles and challenges there that you had to overcome in order to get Pivet up and going.
There are still obstacles and challenges, and that keeps me up right now. The challenge we have right now is probably the hardest that I've come across. But you touched on a point. There had to be obstacles. I mean, we're doing our genealogy right now. Our family did. My little younger brother is, just to try and really capture it all. Again, a uniquely African American experience, right? And some of our documentation of our generational ancestors wasn't kept, right?
Correct.
Who they were. And where they were. And so we're having our genealogy put together just so we know knowledge of self and where we come from in full. And so, no one in the home, having gone to 4-year college, I didn't have that reference point. So I got to college and had no one at home to be like, oh yeah, this is what kind of coursework you should take your freshman year. Don't overload yourself like they're telling you. This is how you behave in a dorm. This is how often you wash your clothes when you're out on your own now, young man. Like, these little daily obstacles that affect your capacity just to be focused on learning and taking advantage of experience, right? But I went out in that path. When I went to the business world, even today, I don't see anyone that looks like me very often in the boardrooms.
Correct.
Still today, right? 2023. And so as Pivet has a dubious, great story or narrative being the first black-owned consumer electronics brand that's ever had a direct supplier relationship with Best Buy. We were the first. And we've had that relationship going on 3 years. That's 2020.
Right. So your if I walk into Best Buy, and so your product would be in what area? Because I heard you say telephone cases.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So our product is in Best Buy. It's in Target, T-Mobile. We have another carrier that we're in the middle of preparing to launch in Q3 this year with new product. And it's in Best Buy. You'd find it in the mobile category. So Best Buy Mobile next to it. So our primary products right now are mobile phone cases. And what sets them apart, as I mentioned earlier, is that we have this additive, this plastic enhancing material that we call self-cycle. And that we call it that to also describe the technology and how it works, because we've spent years to try and figure out how do we provide it to consumers? How do we tell our marketing story in a way? Joe Madison says it all the time. You got to put it where the goats can get it.
Right.
As low as you can get, in the most simplistic manner possible. And so self-cycle technology is this idea, this technology in which, this additive goes into the plastic at manufacturing, and Will hates when I say this, but it's a sweetener. is the way I like to describe it.
Right.
So what it does is that it allows our plastic to rapidly break down or degrade when introduced into what's called nutrient-rich landfills. See, that's a lot of words just there that mean a lot to some of us and not a lot to others. But nutrient-rich landfills are another word for the trash landfills and such, right?
Right.
And so our plastic, that's traditional non-pivot plastic, when it enters a landfill, will take 500 plus years to even start any level of degradation. So it's here for 6 generations, guaranteed. Our products begin degrading as soon as they are introduced into landfill environments. And so the additive allows the plastic to become attractive to decay bacteria, decay agents that cause biodegradation. And so in third-party lab testing, our products, when treated with self-cycle technology, have been proven to degrade in 3 to 5 or so years. So now you have a product that just consumers, when they just choose a Pivet product, they're being green. And so stepping back, when Will and I started the company, we were working on a couple different, projects, new product design ideas or development ideas, and we called it the 90% problem. 90% of plastic in North America and truthfully globally ultimately end up in landfills as trash.
Correct.
I don't recycle very well. And I grew up being taught reduce, reuse, recycle. Without sharing my age, it's been over 40 years of having been taught that, right?
Correct.
And so, and in America, we still only put 10% of product back into some type of recycling process. So we called it a 90% problem. Self-cycle provides the 90% solution, because if you buy a Pivet product, our plastics will rapidly degrade in nutrient-rich environments like landfills, where 90% of plastic ends up anyway. So,
well, earlier in the 6 o'clock hour, I was talking about the fact that here in New Jersey, now for the most part, at least in where I am, you have to bring your own bag to the store. And the thinking behind that was exactly what you're talking about in terms of so many plastic bags that are now going to wind up in those landfills. Now, being a marketing major, knowing that any company always has to have a differentiator, what I'm hearing from you is this self-cycle technology was your differentiator. How did you come up with that?
So it's a funny story, and the story and summary of that is that Will and I, we have a very yin and yang business partnership and relationship. I'm more in the gray. He's a very black and white. We were just talking about this 2 weeks ago on a call we were having, and as we were looking at the industry, and I have put quite a few brands that are currently in store right now across the country that are some of the top 10 brands in the country, and I've assisted or helped in getting them in their places in their early years. I am very familiar in the telecom mobile accessories world of the wastage. How much product, like, again, I mentioned earlier, having worked in a distribution environment, and I understand logistics and supply chain at a level to know how product gets the conceptualizing or product development all the way to where we're putting the products in stores and then the end of life of a product and what happens after it comes out of the store. I know that full life cycle. And it's a lot of waste at each stage. Over forecasting on the front end means a lot of material that doesn't get used in final production. Over forecasting on that production ends up with a lot more products being available in supply for consumer demand. That forecast either is right or wrong, never perfect, and you end up with product no longer in demand a year later, particularly in our 12-month life cycle industry. And then where does it go, right? And so, we already knew about the waste issue, and he and I chatted, and he is a massive environmentalist and very much into, because he's from New Zealand, he's a Samoan Kiwi. And we sat and talked about this and blended our ideas around, having a material that could allow phone cases or plastic to degrade quickly would be amazing. And so he really took the helm on that side of it and really pushed the development of the recipe And then we put it all together and started to implement it into our products, and I took it from there to bring it to the market.
That is amazing, because again, you want to be different in order to attract the attention of the customer. So if I now walk into one of these stores that you mentioned, I'm going to now look for your product. And, I'm looking here. Whenever Nikki originally emailed me, she had a couple areas there that we can talk about. Also, it was the lack of diversity in the tech space, little known black inventors, and environmental racism. Mm-hmm. You want to say anything along those lines?
Well, all three of those are Pivet. So the lack of black tech leadership, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, in my career, I've sat in boardrooms in Apple. I've sat in boardrooms in Minnesota with Target and Best Buy. I've sat in boardrooms in Japan with one of the largest carriers there. I've been all over the world in my career for the most part, and I don't see myself a lot of times in the spaces that I've gotten to. And so part of Pivet, part of the what we're trying to do with Pivet is be also a beacon. I am trying to create a business that can be seen by those that look like me as a way to show we can do all of this. And it's a fascinating moment because, again, there's this generational narrative that occurred in which, and again, like I said, I'm pushing 50, man, just to say it. And
hey, listen, there ain't nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm proud of it.
That's exactly right, because not a lot of us are getting there. So yeah.
And but there in my generation, we had some reason this perception that black folks can't do everything, and yet all those before us did everything.
Correct.
When this country had separate and equal, and the segregation and every hostile policy against black folks in this country, we were thriving. We were thriving. We were doctors. We were engineers. We were entrepreneurs. We were inventors. Like I mentioned earlier with Best Buy, we helped them start their first Black History Month program in the mobile category, and it's a funny story. I sat with our contacts there one day, and it was during the summer. And so in the summer across the country, there's pride celebrations in different states, different times. So it's the whole summer for the most part. And I remember sitting with the buyer there saying, "Hey, I saw a bunch of products with rainbow and pride concepts on there. That's brilliant because you guys recognize that the LGBTQ community is your customer. So good on you for understanding to talk to them. But black folks over-index in tech. We over-consume and drive trends in social media, electronics, technology. We are trend-setting, and we consume massively electronics. I think we're moving towards being able to have a 2.1 billion spending capacity.
Correct.
So why are you not talking to us? And honestly, they said, "Well, be honest, Michael, we don't know how to. We're not sure how to do this.
Wow.
We don't want to go out there and look like some of these other brands that go and faulty step because they make because they got the wrong people telling them the wrong message." I said, "That's good, but I've been black my whole life. I'm sitting right here.
Right.
You should be talking to me because I partner with you guys. Why would you not come talk to me?" And they're like, "Yeah, you're right." And so we started.
I'm sitting here saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So, you're right.
But these are the things this is the beacon. This is the part of Pivet that I'm trying to do for my personal space, right? So we did 4 designs. We did a Sankofa design, which is West African vocabulary, and the definition is that you stand on the shoulders of those before you, right? So we used that, and we put that on a product, and we had those on sale online. We also did a homage to Rosa Parks and leveraged the term "nah" N-A-H with a period to reference like that moment for her where she's like, "Nah, you must be wanting to talk to somebody else because I'm not getting about this."
I know that's right.
Right. So but on the inventor side, and where I was most proud was we focused on Lewis Latimer and Garrett Morgan. And those 2 gentlemen alone have changed the world, and most people have no idea.
Correct. Absolutely, 100% correct. You're
carbon
correct.
filament. Everyone knows who Thomas Edison is, and I do this story. I do an entrepreneur program at my local high school, and I teach this segment all the time. Louis Latimer, you go look in the U.S. Patent Trade Organization, you'll see something called a carbon filament. Guess who patented it? It's a black man.
Correct.
He had to sell it to Thomas Edison, but my understanding of the history is he had to first defend it twice against Thomas Edison trying to take it.
Correct.
Illegally. And so the light bulb that we all are familiar with and use in its evolution up to what we have today was only successful and possible by a black man by the name of Louis Latimer, black entrepreneur. Garrett Morgan, the first gas mask.
Correct. Traffic light. Yes. Yes.
Our whole world exists the way it does today because of the entrepreneurial capacities and accomplishments of black Americans. And so we brought that to Best Buy. It was fairly successful as a way to get them to show them like black history, and we did it with Best Buy in that capacity because I wanted to show current technology. Let's tie it to black inventors of technology that created the foundation for what we have today. We wouldn't have no phones if we didn't have lights.
Correct.
We wouldn't know how to be able to work 24/7 to create them. We wouldn't have it if we didn't have traffic lights and gas masks.
Correct.
It's just these men did massive things, and we don't know. But let's call focus to that. Black history isn't just civil rights and slavery, right? And so I Pivet is meant to try and call that out and do so in a commercializing, capitalistic way, but being authentic. That's part of the culture we've created as well in houses. Speak how you speak, act how you act, be authentic, be honest, be true. We don't lie. We don't greenwash. We went to a third party called Intertech, one of the largest testing facilities in the world, and we gave them our materials in plastic and said, you test it and tell me how this self-cycle technology works. And that's how and what we use to go out to the world to broadcast. It's not Michael or Will's words. It's not some marketing language. It's fact. It's actual. It's authentic. So when you see a Pivet product, you know it's we speak the truth. We are authentic. We're pivoting even in that capacity, right? And then when you talk about the environmental racism bit, I mean, that's, again, I could come back just to have a conversation around how neighborhoods of color tend to be where facilities are, we can look at some obvious, if you just think of something like Flint, Michigan, where
right.
When something so bad as pipes were leaking lead and water sources were contaminated, and that is an example of environmental racism because that predominantly black community got shut off and was not provided resources from the state or local to be able to fix what was needed to continue to have healthy, clean water. And it's still not done. Still not done.
Correct.
Right? And so Pivet, by the nature of creating products that are safer for the environment, is contributing to tearing that down by being a black-owned business that's leading the way.
Again, it's interesting that you would say it because, again, a lot of people do not connect various issues with various ethnic groups. And one of the things I had posted on my Facebook page last week was excellence does not have a color. So the fact that people probably would be surprised that you as an African-American male and an entrepreneur would be taking on environmental issues such as, how quickly something decomposes. So, and so my next question is, as you walk into these various boardrooms, do they know you're African American prior to you getting there, or because Michael Pratt could go either way?
I laugh because I answered that. Wow, we are kindred souls, brother.
Yes, we are.
I laugh about that. My father used to tell me, he said the one thing they messed up on was they gave us their names. He used to tell me that because in today's world, right, where we are email, right, we are on text and we are not always in person.
Correct.
Michael Pratt, I went to, I told you I was in a military and conservative Christian type home environment, so academics were real in my house. So I can write pretty well. I'm
Right.
in my vocabulary. I have a decent vocabulary. I can
Right.
speak, right? And when you put it all together, if you put the stereotypes on me, you wouldn't know I'm black.
Correct.
My name, what I'm doing, how I write, how I speak sometimes, people wouldn't know that I'm black. And so I have literally had moments where I have engaged with, in a business development capacity, where people are dealing with me on the phone, dealing with me on email, and so excited. Oh, Michael, when you get out here, and I show up, and you literally you could see in their eyes like, hold up.
Correct. That's why I asked the question, because I've had the same experiences.
You're black? Like, oh, you thought I was supposed to be using the N-word and talking with Ebonics to be black. Sorry, bro. Like, we are, we have variation as well. We're not just one group, not a monolithic group. Sorry, man. But let's go do this business because you were so impressed. And I actually have been able to leverage that ignorance to my advantage.
I know that's right.
A lot of times they don't realize, and I'm sure if they did, there would have been bigger obstacles in front of me at different points in my career because of those who were ignorant enough to want to put them in front of.
No, absolutely. See, this is where it goes back. It ties back into our initial discussion about the affirmative action. And I was saying this earlier. Affirmative action was put in place to right a wrong. Because had folks been doing things right to begin with, you wouldn't have needed affirmative action. Because had you been hiring folks on qualifications, solely qualifications, it wouldn't have mattered what color they were. So like you just said, in terms of you hear me on the phone or you've seen my writing and this and the other, and you've automatically assumed, because that was done in a correct, quote-unquote correct manner, that I had to be Caucasian. That's what I'm saying. Excellence doesn't have a color. Excellence does not have a skin color, does not have a race, does not have an ethnicity. Either you do the thing excellent or not. So I laughed because
that's
when I asked...
100% correct. 100% correct. And again, I had referenced earlier, I don't know if it was pre-show or on the call around the conversation with my children last night around affirmative action and talking about, it's funny, I'm not going to steal that from you. Excellent doesn't have a color. Sorry, I hope...
Feel free to take it. Feel free, take it.
But but that's part of what I was trying to impart on them is you will be, like, it's already a part of the expectations in the home. You will do the best that you can always, no matter what you're working on, because excellence doesn't have a color. But the reality of it is that and we were talking about HBCUs. I'm heading out to Howard this week with my oldest because we're getting ready, and that's kind of number one target. And we were discussing, why do we have HBCUs? Right? And
correct.
What was the relevance of how those got started, and just explaining to my children that we have them not because black folks went out and said, we're going to go set up our own schools. We don't want to go to those other schools that we're already paying taxes for but don't have access. We're not going to do that.
Exactly.
We want to do it ourselves. No.
Right.
No. Separate and equal, or separate but equal, HBCUs were created to keep us from going to the predominantly white schools that our ancestors were paying taxes on to have access to.
Our ancestors helped build manually with those bricks and everything else, helped build. Absolutely, because I said something very similar in the 6 Act when I was doing my commentary in terms of that's how our fraternities and sororities got started. Because it's not that fraternities and sororities didn't exist, they did, but in that particular instance, they weren't really allowing us in. So that's whenever you got folks that, okay, we'll start our own. And
there were a few jewels that
yes,
in understanding how to go ahead and start that illustrious first.
It was 7 of them.
Organization. There were
7 of them up there in Cornell, in Cornell, New York.
In 1906.
1906 it was. I think we got another commonality too.
Excellence doesn't have a color.
Excellence don't have a color, but I think old gold and black. I think we got something else in common.
There is excellence in that.
Yes, it is. So yeah. Now I'm really not surprised. I'm really not surprised. I expect that. Like you said, of an alpha brother, I expect that of an alpha man.
And you know what's funny, Mark, is that part of why you've been pledged and went that direction was I remember, like, you joined a fraternity to align yourself and network with everything that fraternity offers and
correct,
right? It's a network, and I remember looking at all the different fraternities, black fraternities, and it was clear I was an alpha man because, like, the accomplished men of
correct.
Before me, it was like that. Well, that's who I want to be.
Correct.
I want to be like him.
It was same here.
And it was like, well, I identified with the alphas before me that I was aware of, the accomplished alphas before me. I was like, that's the fraternity I want to be a part of, right? And again, it all plays back to this entrepreneurial effort with Pivet in wanting to be out and do the best, right? And so, I am conscious over making sure that, like, all of our marketing activities have people of color in them, and particularly black women. And in particular, I was just talking about colorism last night with my kids, and discussing that as part of even this narrative with affirmative action and just all of what it is, right, with us. And we make conscious efforts to make sure that we bring a focus on black women in our marketing collaterals, and in particular, darker hued, more melanated women, because that's, again, something in my era. And earlier we dealt with this, we talked about the brown bag requirement last night, and the fact that, colorism and how even that came about within the African American community. But even within my opportunities in Pivet on our marketing side, we take a focus to pivot away from and pivot towards making sure that we are authentic and representing the culture, representing all of the culture and the beauty within the community of all hues, right? And that's not just African American culture. Like, we are focused on, as a brand, being a brand that's representative for everyone, but doing so and demonstrating so from a black perspective.
But see, now there's a couple of things here. There's a couple of things you keep referencing that is critical. I keep hearing you say you talked to your kids. You had a discussion with your children. That is critical because you're discussing real world issues at their age.
That's correct.
You're keeping them up to what's going on in the world at their age. And then there was something else you just said, and I was listening to a video with John King last night, a part of assignments I have for school. And what John was saying was the fact that we want black excellence is not just to be known for black children. Everybody needs to understand black excellence, regardless of what color, ethnicity, racial background. Not just black kids, not the only ones that need to understand black excellence. White kids need to understand that too, and that's essentially what he was saying. And again, I just heard you say that in terms of your product. I need everybody who gets the product, regardless of what color you are, to understand the excellence that goes with it, and the excellence of our people, and the excellence of so forth and so on. So it's not a product that's made just for black people to buy. It's the products are for it, just like any other products. When you go in the store, you should not turn around and say, well, I'm not going to buy that because that's a black-owned product.
That's right.
No more than you would go in and say, well, I'm not going to buy that because it's a white-owned product. No. And so, absolutely, I applaud you in terms of the inroads and where you're trying to go, and even with the environment and so forth. Because, again, those are places in general people don't expect us to be, and I don't know why, because that's where the expectations and things have. Well, why can't he? Just like Best Buy said. Well, yeah, you're right. Like, you got somebody sitting right there in front of you. Why don't you talk to me? Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
No, they just didn't know.
I laugh at that story you were talking about because it happened to me, and it happened with an African-American person. Whenever I told you I was in the Air Force, when I took the ASVAB, I scored extremely high, and I talked to the recruiter on the telephone. Now, I could tell just how she talked that she was black, but she could not tell and did not know, based on my voice, based on my ASVAB score, that I was black. So whenever I walk up to her, whenever I had to go sign the paperwork, she was working a balloon show. She was working a booth. So I walk up to the booth, and I said, Sergeant Rudolph? She says, yes. And I says, I'm Marc Medley. And she busts out laughing. Michael, I mean, she belly laughed. And whenever she finished, she looked at me, she says, I'm so sorry. I said, what's the problem? She said, I looked at your scores and I heard your voice on the phone, and I was expecting a white Marc Medley.
Yeah. And the name.
Right. And this was a black woman that was there. But that's exactly the way, like you said, stereotypes are. Because, see, this is my thing in terms of one of the things that gets my goat, and I was just talking about this last night, is whenever folks says, you talk white. I said, well, what is that? I said, there is no such thing. A couple of things there. What are you saying? Are you saying that like you said earlier, I should always be shucking and jiving and ebonics and this, that, and the other? So that's a backward comment toward it. And the other piece of that is I'm not willing to give white folk that much credit to say they do things right all the time. And going back to my commentary of excellence does not have a color.
Right.
So, whenever when we start making commentary like that, well, you know what, you talk white and you act like, well, what are you saying?
But I'll tell you something, Mark. This is one of the things. Again, I studied social sciences and history. Again, this is a moment. So I am of the belief this is somewhat intentional, because if we go 2 generations back, black folks were not talking that way.
Correct.
When there was segregation, when there was the hostilities that the country employed on black folks, like I took my kids last night through founding of the quote unquote founding of the country, like 1776 forward, to show the timelines with them, so I can make it real for them that this is life history and not a book, ancient type of history. We talk about what's going on in this country and the plight of African Americans from the origin in this country, or at least our current description of that historically, but to now, right? And again, putting it in perspective with affirmative action, but to show the hundreds of years that went forward with this denial of equal opportunity, and then this blip that's now a moment, right, that my father, who's 79 this year, sorry for putting that out there, Dad.
Well, God bless.
Matters, but yeah, he is, cut from something different. They don't cut him that way no more. Out of rural Mississippi, he outlived me. And they
I know that's right.
He grew up and went to the Duck Hill School for colored children, and was blocked from being any and everything. The opportunities for him coming out was vocational or military.
Right.
Not to go become an astronaut or an engineer.
Right.
My father is the smartest man on the planet in my world. Like I joke not. He's probably, if he went to test, is Mensa capable and genius level. Like the man is brilliant. But was not given full opportunities.
Correct.
And I put that into the perspective last night to show my children that in just what is actually one generation, our country had the right idea to try and level the playing field and then just took it back, right? So my dad has seen and lived through that entire experience and was here before it, because he's 79. There was no affirmative action 79 years ago.
Correct.
And then it does now, right? And so this whole process is fascinating. All of how we are where we are today, and being able to be aware of our history, being able to be confident, and that's part of what I'm trying to teach my kids. Going back to your point about, I keep referencing, sitting down with my children. We try our hardest to still do family dinners throughout the week. We have active kids with extracurricular activities, so it's hard nowadays. We used to be fervent churchgoers, and COVID kind of tore that up for us. And,
right.
We're struggling. Just being very transparent and getting back into that role even.
That's correct.
I'm in the home, and then extracurricular makes Sundays difficult to stay in the church. But I am trying to teach them, and I am present with them to really show them, like, we're pretty special people, and
absolutely,
we don't all have to speak the same way. We don't all have to think the same way. There is no reason to think African Americans are monolithic, because we accept variations in all other cultures, but we don't in other ethnic groups.
Correct.
But we, some reason, don't within our community. We all have to abide by this stereotype, and I believe, like, that's where I'm going to with I think it's like it feels intentional at times that there's something reason why we continually get put in a perspective of being articulated as being monolithic, and that
correct.
The one segment of our diverse culture is what is put on display the most, whereas it's one segment and it's probably the smallest of the totality of our group, because the truth be told, as a group that is a fairly new culture in the world, right? Because we were founded out, our existence as African Americans is founded out of indentured coming out of slavery.
Correct.
And so, yes, we should have some challenges in our culture, because if you understand the atrocities of American slavery, then you should understand there's reasons why our culture has some of the challenges it does.
No, absolutely, because that's what that book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, is about. That's exactly what that's about. I mean, as a matter of fact, a lot of the things that we go there is still from the post-trauma of that. That's almost like in our DNA and embedded in us from that experience. So no, absolutely. And I like that. Like, all right, I'm gonna go back to your Sankofa case. So now, that's a phone case that has the Sankofa brand. I'm very familiar with Sankofa. Now, the cases, are they? I mean, because like a lot of the cases have these.
The Sankofa was for Black History Month, for the iPhone 11. So the goal back then was every year we would work with Best Buy and kind of help lead the Black History Month concepts in the Best Buy mobile area so that they were authentic. We don't do that. We don't work with them on that anymore.
Okay, because like you're talking about sharing the history with your kids and sharing products that have symbols like the Sankofa bird or what have you. That is so important, because all of it really is about exposure and education. And one of the things, again, in that video that I was watching with John King was, and I agree with him, and I've said it before myself, all of this stuff, going back to what you were saying a couple of minutes ago about almost conscious and intentional, it's systematic. All of this stuff really is bigger than a lot of the things that folks might think. It is systematic and intentionally designed, whether it's on a conscious or subconscious level or not. Now, the fact that they can sit there and pull back affirmative action, that's about as flat up, conscious, and in your face as you can get.
Yes. That is about as clear as you can get, right? And saying we don't actually want, and it's funny because I spoke with some folks this week, some friends of mine of different ethnic groups. This whole group is white, Indian, and Indian meaning from India, not Native American.
Right.
Black, and so forth, and white folks from UK. And it's funny, what you have to ask, why is it such an issue to not allow for there to be any consideration of race, in particular Black folks, in the admissions process and another process, if you understand the history of the country and the hundreds of years in which equal opportunity wasn't even, I mean, law used to say we weren't even a full human.
Correct. 3/5 of a man. Absolutely.
3/5 of a man.
Yes.
To now, right? And again, we're still only talking about this one little era in the 60s forward that created this boom, this level playing field attempt. It was not a level playing field. It just was an attempt to create more opportunities, and we all rushed through.
Correct.
There are a large percentage of Black folks that were able to take advantage of this effort to make a level playing field of opportunity. Right? Again, there's that key word. There's opportunity. That's affirmative action was only meant to create opportunity.
Correct.
Equal opportunity, not equal outcomes.
Correct.
I still had to have good grades. I still had to have extracurricular.
Correct.
I still had to follow the same principles that Southern Black folks told their children for generations. You have to be 2 times better than your peer to be considered equal.
Correct.
And so my extracurricular, my activities, I did better than those around me because I was told I had to just to be considered equal, right? And so the misnomer on affirmative action through its execution, which was intentional, was to say, oh, you only got here because of your...
Correct.
No, it was only being used to give me an opportunity to get here because I was equal already.
Correct.
I took the ASVAB. I did all of that as well. I blew that thing out the water. I remember the coding. the coding thing where you have
Yes.
to match the codes in the
Yes.
I almost finished that section, and the guys administering are like, we've never seen anyone. I was like, man, my motor skills are good, bro. You better ask me. I think I have like 2 codes that I didn't color in or shade in within that 2 minute or 1 minute. I do like 60 in 2 minutes. I can't remember. It's been years, but I knocked that out. But like there was never. No one can look back on my academics and my career and say, oh, he got that because he was
correct.
Nah, bro.
Correct.
I stand out and have always done above those around me, and have always achieved an effort and had an effort to, because I had a home where I was told to do so. I was taught that by my parents, and I'm trying to do the same with
for
mine,
your kids. Exactly.
That's my dinner table, but that's also I manage 2 soccer teams, and for youth soccer teams, and those are my children as well. And I put the same message on them on the pitch. I put that on them around their academics and around them, and it's teams that are diverse, right? Different groups. So it's in essence, it's part of who I am and what I push on everyone, right? So, but this idea that Pivet, for example, we don't push being a black-owned company as the first and foremost. And when COVID hit, and in particular when George Floyd was murdered in Minnesota,
right?
I had a call with a senior executive at Best Buy at the time, and we were discussing, and I was sitting back like, hey man, we got to make sure that they understand who I am, right? So we had this call because in my back of my head, I was like, I hadn't ever met this person and talked with them, even with my accomplishment in both its accomplishment and dubiousness of being one of the first black-owned business to have a supplier relationship direct. I let it be known in the beginning of the call, hey man, there will be no photos of me going up about us in our partnership. There will be no references to the fact that I'm black. Anything we do at this moment, just because it might be seen as a politically correct opportunity, because I'm going to diminish my business, and I'm not the one. And so I was like, but if you want to have the ability to brag and talk about Pivet being I always say one of, but the first black-owned consumer brand that you guys have had a direct partnership with, we can do that 3 years from now. Right. But we'll do it 3 years from now when we're talking about how big Pivet is in your store and how the business has grown and partnered together, because you've given Pivet access the same way as you've given the brands that to Best Buy.
Correct.
I was like, you give me a seat at the table like you've done for others that don't look like me.
Correct.
And allow me access to be able to build my brand the way I've helped others do in your retail footprint. 3 years from now, when we're talking about how well Pivet and Best Buy are doing, people then will be like, oh, because then you get to show me.
Correct.
But not in the front.
Correct.
You not get to use my likeness in that capacity. Again, that's the Pivet. That's the authenticity. That's being real, right? We're not. I get to, and I say I get to because with no negative connotation, there are folks before us that didn't feel like they could be authentic because they felt like that could be played against them.
That's right.
They spoke a certain way because back then it was you got to talk white. Right, because if you talk black, you might not get what you do, right? And you got to act a certain way. Like, nope. The way I talk here is the way I talk in the boardroom, is the way I talk everywhere. It's who Michael Pratt is, and that's authentic.
Absolutely.
And to me, again, I still find that is still a missing archetype, both in the American business environment and just in American culture. I just want to touch on something you mentioned around earlier, and I want to reference President Obama. So my oldest is 17. My middle daughter, my princess, is 14, and my youngest is 11. In their world, they were born into an America, and particularly I reference my oldest with this dude, Obama, right? But not just my black children. All of the children all the white children, all the Hispanics, all children were born where they had the leader of the free world, the most powerful icon in the world, was this black dude. That, in its own reality, broke the old paradigm. You can never tell those lies anymore. You can never say black people this, black people that, ceiling this, ceiling that. They are not equal. They are not, because an entire generation grew up and were born under that man who looked like them as the head and who executed, at least in the social capacity, brilliantly with his beautiful wife and kids. And demonstrated all of the things that don't fit the stereotypes of what we're taught in pop culture, what black people, black men, black families look like. Showed it wasn't true by just being the president. But it's not my son or my 3 children that saw that. It's all of their friends too. It's all the white children. It's all the black children, all the brown children. So taking the opportunities to push where we have opportunities to do so, and to lead and to pioneer and to entrepreneur and to be present in our authentic selves is part of what I'm trying to do with Pivet. Is what we're all responsible to do to help. Because if we just go out and do, we break these stereotypes.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. So, my good Alpha brother, we have come down to the end of our time, and what I do is and we've been doing it throughout the entire show, but I give you an opportunity to promote your product, your business. The only thing you can't do is say a dollar amount, but anything short of a price or a dollar, I'm going to turn the mic off, and you can let folks know how they can get a hold of you or your products or what have you. So I'm going to turn the mic off and give you an opportunity to promote or shout out or whatever you'd like to do, and then we'll be out.
Excellent. Well, Mark, first of all, thank you for hosting me on your show today. I'm blessed to be here, and I'm appreciative of it, and I look forward to coming back in the future to talk more about Pivet. But Pivet Communications, we spell it Pivet. It's the phonetic spelling for the word, and that E is upside down, and that's our brand. And our products are available Target, Best Buy, T-Mobile, Amazon, and then direct-to-consumer on our website, mypivet.com. That's MYPIV is Victor, E is Eric, T is Tom.com. And you can go there and find mobile accessories for your phone, whether it's iPhone, Samsung device. We provide cables. We provide charging cables. We provide AirPod cases. And we support iPhone all the way back to iPhone 11. We support Galaxy devices all the way back to the Galaxy S10. And you will continue to see us expand and support other OEM brands like Google, Motorola, and the likes, and continue to introduce our eco-friendly products with the self-cycle technology that we have, which enables our plastic products to rapidly degrade when you throw them away, which 90% of plastic in this world ends up being thrown away anyways. And so, yeah, mypivet.com. Again, Mark, thank you so much for hosting me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you we're going to definitely stay in touch, especially now that I know we Alpha Brothers, we definitely going to stay in touch. And I thank Nikki for bringing us together, because there are 2 publicists that have carte blanche to me. And I say this anytime I have either one of their folks appear. Nikki Woods and Pam Perry. Those 2, when they reach out to me, anything I got open, they got carte blanche. So as soon as Nikki reached out to me, said, "What dates do you have?" I said, "These are the dates." And so I am always grateful and thankful for those 2 ladies.
I want to say one thing, Mark. Like, Nikki is a blessing in our business. We were looking for somebody that could help tell the story I've told on your show today. But again, being authentic and we found Nikki, and she's been amazing. She's just a full person all around. She's well connected. And she, even for me, provides guidance and leadership for me as I'm running this path of trying to be an entrepreneur. But the fact that she connected us today, again, I feel pretty happy. I'm a sweat it out this weekend with a smile I was on your show.
I know that's right. Well, this is what happens. I record it, and what I do is I archive it on my YouTube channel, and you have MP3 links, so I'm going to email all that to you and Nikki, and you all can use them any way you choose to use them. Once I email them over to you, they're yours. And again, I met Nikki because Nikki actually was a guest on the show years ago, and she and I formed a relationship from that point on, and then anybody she recommends, I was like, you got it. Pam Perry, same way. Like, you got it. Those two, out of all the publicists I deal with, those two, carte blanche. They call me, they email me, they text me, their guest is on.
I appreciate that. That's another little validation that we made the right choice.
Oh, yeah.
In partnering with her.
Oh, yes. So, my brother, I will be in touch. I'll email you, and then, if you're up in the New York, New Jersey area, let me know, and we can see if we can catch up with each other. I
do come to New Jersey. Verizon's out there, so
You're right.
know we're going to connect. So,
okay.
Sure.
Yeah, if you come out on a meeting with Verizon, whatever, yeah, let me know. Give me a jingle, and we'll hook up, have lunch, dinner, or something.
Absolutely.
All right.
And
all right, man.
Wonderful weekend, wonderful 4th of July, and we'll be in touch.
You do the same. All right.
All right, thank you.
Take care now.